Hello everybody, I'm Clouderman and welcome to this brand new YouTube series for Kerbal Space Program 1. So, if you are all familiar with my channel, then you may know that my first ever YouTube series was on Kerbal Space Program 2. However, the development for KSP2 isn't exactly going very well at the moment, in that it's basically not happening at all, so I figured why not do another YouTube series, but this time on Kerbal Space Program 1. So this series is going to be a bit more relaxed than the last one. I'll admit I did go a little bit hard on the preparation for the KSP2 series that I did, so this one is going to be a little more free play. If I make a mistake, then you will see said mistakes, and hopefully it will provide some entertainment and comedy for you guys. And yeah, there are a few things that I would really like to try and do in this playthrough that I've never done before as well, but we will get into those as we actually make our way through this series. So if we look at the start screen, you can tell that we already have some mods installed. We have Eve installed, we have several other visual mods like Parallax 2 as well, and the whole point of this kind of mod build is that it's supposed to try and make the game more or less like Kerbal Space Program 2. Now if you want to know the general mod kind of setup that I have, please watch Bogue's videos on YouTube where he basically explains how to turn Kerbal Space Program 1 into Kerbal Space Program 2. Anyway, yeah, so let's get started with a brand new game, and I'm going to call this play CASA because you know, Kerbal Aeronautics and Space Administration, and I'm also going to add a CASA logo which I have downloaded. With regards to the difficulty, the first thing I want to do is turn off allow reverting and allow quick loading, because I do not want to be able to just jump back to the pad whenever I make a mistake, which is something I always do. And in advanced, what we're going to do is we're going to turn on required signal for control. We also want plasma blackout as well. I'm also going to add always allow action groups and resource transfer obeys cross-read rules. That's going to be an interesting one. Let's see how long it takes for that to bite me in the ass. I think we're also going to just turn all of these ones on except for Kerbal's level up immediately and max out the G-force. And now we will start a new game. Right, so now we are in the KSC. We'll get rid of that one. We will also sort out our Kerbal construction time presets, and with this I personally just like to have everything switched on. And then with regards to the upgrades, the VAB upgrades, I like to upgrade rate 1 to 0.5 and then rate 2 to 0.4, and that way rate 2 will be ever so slightly slower than rate 5. We're going to ignore the spaceplane hangar for the time being and just put the rest straight into the research and development facility. So here we are at the KSC, and you'll notice that it is a slightly more extended version of the Kerbal Space Center than we are used to at KSP1. The reason for that is I have a couple of mods, which is the KSC extender alongside, I believe it is the Kerbal construction mod. You need both of those. Now personally I'm not too keen on the way that our facilities are so low level compared to the rest of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Alt F12, I'm going to go to cheats, and I'm just going to max out the facilities because personally I think it looks better, and also I can't be bothered faffing around upgrading facilities. Now I'm also going to add 20 science as well, and the reason for that is we do have the modular launch pads mod installed, so I'm just going to quickly research the first 3 launchpad nodes. Anyways, the first thing we want to do then is go into our mission control building and accept our first available contract, which is leave the launchpad, so we will accept that. And now, speaking of contracts, one thing that I do want to do is if we go into our settings and then go down to contract configurer, what I want to do is I want to actually turn a couple of these off. So I don't like doing tourism contracts. I also do not like doing part testing contracts either, and then I am also going to turn off rescue and recovery because I don't particularly like doing that either. With regards to other settings, I also want to change my Kerbal construct settings a little bit. I'm going to enable ComNet ground stations and basically open up every single launch site and base that is available to us. In Kerbalism, what I want to do is turn on lifetime radiation, and then in the number 2 Kerbalism, I want to turn off the notifications for electric charge and turn the space weather notifications on, just because it can get very annoying when you're constantly getting notifications from like dead satellites in space that haven't got any electricity. And now I guess it's just down to building our first rocket. Anyway, now we are in the VAB, we'll say goodbye to Verna, and the first thing we want to do really is build our first rocket, and I think for this what we're going to do is we are just literally going to use the Pathfinder 1 core, and then for the engine we're going to use a Vicenzia solid rocket booster. We'll go for structural and we'll grab the redstone basic launch clamp. Now, of course, we do have our modular launch pads stuff available as well, but I'm going to ignore these for the time being until we actually get into building, proper launch pads and so on for our launch vehicle. So I'm just going to lower it towards the ground. And before we launch, I'm actually going to put a number on this because I like to try and number my rockets to try and keep track of how many launches they've done. So we're going to add a decal for a number. So we'll grab the curved ID flags decal. This is part of another mod. And then I'm just going to place that on there and resize it. I'm also going to change the ID so that it says 01. And now we're going to keep changing those numbers as we play through. But yeah, that is pretty much everything for this. The only other thing I'm going to do now is rotate it ever so slightly and then basically just pitch it down towards the horizon, so we'll be launching out towards the sea. And finally, we'll just make sure our staging stack is in the correct order, and with this we want to basically ignite the engine before we decouple, because I do have a mod called Scrap, I think it is, which actually causes engine failures. So if you try and ignite an engine before you actually decouple, then the engine will most likely fail. So let's name this. We're going to name this the Pathfinder 1. And now you'll notice we also have Kerbal construction time installed, which means it's going to take 8 days and 3 hours to build. And I personally prefer having stuff like KST on my games because it feels more natural. I don't like launching builds straight from the VAB onto the pad. So let's hit launch and let's get our first rocket underway. Okay, so now we are back at the KSC where we can see we have our Pathfinder lined up, but we do still need to research all of this tech. So I'm going to warp to complete, and once this is all done, we'll get into our very first launch. So here we are on the pad, and you'll notice that we do have a mod called Scrap, and I mentioned that mod. This is the one which basically creates engine failures. So we are going to close this. It's saying that the satellite is actually the worst part, and it's terrible vessel safety, which isn't great, but then who cares? It's only our first rocket. So yeah, let's get into the launch. So 3, 2, 1. Oh. See, now that was an engine failure. First attempt and it was an engine failure. Oh well, that's a shame, but let's have a look, see what we've got. Yeah, we've got an Scrap. Vicenzia solid rocket has suffered an ignition failure. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to wait until this actually gets somewhere so we can actually recover it. Oh, there we go. I don't know why it does that when you speed up the time, but is it going to be recoverable? However, you'll notice that has just completed the contract, so that still classes as leaving the launch pad. Anyway, yeah, let's recover this. I think I'm going to recover this back to the VAB so we can use it again. So that has given us 5 science for recovering the vessel. We also got some extra science as well, which gives us 8 science in total so far. So I guess all we need to do now is wait for the pad to be reconditioned. It's already done. We already have Pathfinder as well, so we'll hit edit. And you can see we literally only have the probe core left at the moment. So let's have a look and see what our facilities are like. So you can see we have a little bit less energy than we did because this stuff doesn't automatically reset. You need to make sure everything is filled back up. I'm also going to increase the actual data capacity because we want to do a bit of telemetry while we are doing this flight. So we'll pop the engine back on the bottom, and now I think what we're going to need to do is we are going to need to add some more rockets to this because our next mission will be reaching the upper atmosphere. So let's go to coupling. Let's find the DGR VDO3 coupler because that is the one specifically to go between the single rocket and the 3-way rocket. You know what, we might as well do the full configuration actually. So we'll go back to coupling. We will grab the HLR VD11 decoupler and we're going to pop that at the top on the hidden node at the top of the 3 engine parts, and then we'll go to engines again and put the 11 engine cluster on the bottom like that, and that is basically our full Explorer style cluster. So we'll make sure our staging stack is correct, and once again we want to fire the engine just before we actually decouple, and now that is pretty much ready. So instead of hitting launch, what we'll do is we'll hit save edits because remember we are editing the top part and we've added all this stuff to it. Okay, and now we are ready to roll out. We'll get that done and get into our second launch. Okay, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, see, there we are, another engine failure. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore that and I'm just going to Is that a second engine failure? It is. Oh, finally, we actually had one engine fire. Jesus. Well, anyways, let's have a look at our messages. So, yeah, the 11-way cluster failed. The 3-way cluster failed. But we have achieved a few world firsts. And now we are crashing straight back to the pad. And I know it looks like the engine is still burning, but it isn't. It's only a very short burn is this engine, and I believe, well, it's another mod that gives you these plumes on the various restocked parts. So we're not actually going to hit anything, which is good. Not going to cause any damage because we do have that available or active. And boom. Right, so that was our first flight. It still wasn't a successful one. Okay, so we'll first of all go to mission control, make sure that we have actually accepted that mission. So we'll take the launch clamp off, we'll raise this up into a higher position. We're also just going to change the number while we are here to make sure that we don't forget which number we are on. And now I think what we'll do is we will, you know what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to create a sub-assembly with this in. So we will reroute to the bottom part. Place it in a sub-assembly, and we'll just name this the Pathfinder 1 cluster. Now we can literally create a new rocket. We might as well save that. Now I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the engine. So we'll go to the engines, and which engines have we got? We have the Viking liquid engine, we have a Sandstone liquid engine. Is that supposed to be the Redstone equivalent? Well, let's try the Sandstone and see what that's like. It doesn't... Yeah, maybe. I mean, let's have a look at this. Fuel tanks. What have we got for fuel tanks? So the eastern ones, they are the analogues for the Vanguard rocket, I believe. The Eto. This looks like it could be the analogue for the Redstone rocket, which is kind of what we want, although that looks like Russian to me. Now, how does the Redstone rocket look? It's got a kind of cone on the top, hasn't it? And then we've got the actual cluster. Yeah, we could try that. That looks like it will work. That is the Eto nose. So yeah, these two belong together. I think probably the one we're going to need to use then is the HLR decoupler again. I'm going to turn this upside down like that. And then if we go back to our sub-assemblies and grab our Pathfinder cluster, we'll be able to just pop that on the top there. And there we have essentially a Redstone rocket. Now it does need the fins, doesn't it? So we'll add some fins onto this. Aha, yes. So there we go. We'll pop this in place, and that makes our fins for our Redstone style rocket. Now, is there another stage up the top here? I feel like there is. I'll tell you what, I'm just going to do a quick bit of research into the Redstone rocket and see what it looks like. Okay, I think there is still a couple of things on here. You know what, we might be able to... Yeah, Eto, there we go. There are other parts. Now, I think that the top does decouple. Yeah, this has a decoupler, so if we pop them on there, then that is essentially going to be our reaction control section, which will get us into position to fire our actual rocket. So what is this? It's an Eto. We'll check to see if there's anything else we're missing. Okay, I think we're not going to bother putting anything else onto this rocket. We're just going to leave it as it is. So the only other thing we want to do now is find a launch stand. And now I believe there is actually a Redstone launch stand in here. It's an Atlas one. Well, after a little bit of testing and tweaking, this is what I've ended up with. So this is essentially a Sandstone rocket. That's what it is called in this game, although as I mentioned, it is the analogue of the Redstone rocket with the Pathfinder on top. We do have the Redstone launch stand petal. We also have a Redstone launch stand with the umbilical cord as well. Where is it? There it is. There's the umbilical. It's also saying there it has 3,800 meters per second of delta V, so this should easily get us into orbit. So yeah, let's close up the cover and let's set this to launch, shall we? And here we are on the pad with our Sandstone 1 rocket. Now, I have added some cameras to this because I do have the camera mod. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it allows us to do this. So we have several cameras positioned around the rocket and the launch stand so we can see what's going on. So let's have a look at this view. Yeah, I'm going to have some fun with these cameras, I think, and we can even see our control surfaces moving. Let's go back to the engine camera. Everything looks pretty kosher to me, so let's get into this launch. So throttle up, RCS and SAS on, and then 3, 2, 1, and we have a launch. So in KSP2, I always went up to 2,500 meters and then started to pitch, just because I found that was the easiest way to get into orbit in KSP2. It was a bit of a steep ascent profile. I did have some comments talking about just how steep the profile was, but you will notice that I've actually started pitching almost immediately off of the pad on this particular launch. So I'm going to basically get ourselves slowly down towards 45 degrees, and we should be around 45 degrees by the time we reach 10,000 meters in height, which we are now, and we're going to just sit at 45 degrees for a moment. I'm also going to throttle down slightly while we are passing through max Q, and once we are nice and fast we can throttle back up again. And now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the manoeuvre node on the bottom left, because even though we have our Kerbal engineer information up here, it's much easier to see what's going on the bottom left of the screen there. So now I think we're going to throttle back up again, and now I'm going to actually start pitching down towards the horizon slowly. We don't want to be too off on our angle when we reach this speed, because it can really easily, flip out, can these rockets. Our apoapsis is now above 70,000, so we're going to throttle right down. Once the burn effects have ended, then we're going to pitch down towards the horizon. We're well over 100 kilometers up, so I'm going to pitch down to about -10. In fact, I'm going to go down a little bit further. I'll go down to 15, and then I'm going to go back up to full throttle until this stage has burned itself out. Okay, our apoapsis at present is 446 kilometers. Our periapsis is 17 kilometers. So all we need to do now is just wait until we're up in our apoapsis, and we'll be able to do our orbital burn. So let's quickly... Oh dear, we've had a malfunction. So our guidance unit has experienced a RCS failure. That's unfortunate. We kind of need the RCS. Let's decouple this anyway. We should be able to. Can we repair it? No, we can't repair it. So we'll decouple it, and hopefully the reaction wheel will be enough to actually get us into position when we want to do our orbital burn. Anyway, let's float around to our apoapsis and actually get this rocket into orbit. So one technique I like to use in KSP1 in particular is when I'm doing manoeuvres in space, what I'll do is I'll set the manoeuvre going, and then I will turn off the SAS and just let the craft drift into position. It just means you're using less RCS, and you're also using less energy, which is much more kind of necessary techniques to use when you've got stuff like Kerbalism installed. Anyway, let's have a look at our contracts. So we have reached the upper atmosphere, cross the radiation belt offered. Let's see. Yeah, let's grab this, because it looks like we are going to be crossing the radiation belt. See, we have a few world firsts, including reaching space and so on. But anyway, let's fast forward to the maneuver node, and then we will perform our orbital insertion. And yeah, now we will go, and I'm going to start a spin stabilization maneuver, because now we will fire our 11 cluster. Once this is out, we will fire our next cluster, and they are all firing, which is good. Okay, so I have a feeling that we have got ourselves not only into an orbit, but into a actual escape trajectory, given that our apoapsis is now at infinity. So let's have a look at the map. Oh wow, yeah, look at that. Look at that. Where exactly are we going, I wonder? But yeah, I'll be interested to see where this rocket actually ends up, because it wasn't intended to go into an escape trajectory. Anyways, so I think that might be classed as a successful mission. That flight actually went a lot better than I expected it to. I genuinely did not expect to end up on such a fast escape trajectory from Kebin. It does mean, though, that we do technically have a satellite, although that satellite is actually not a satellite, it's a piece of debris, technically, because if we hit fly, we'll see that this is in fact the 11 engine cluster, which I did not realise that was still stuck to it, so we might have to modify that in the VAB if we're going to launch this again, which I think we will do because there is another rocket which is similar to the Pathfinder one. So we'll make sure we are cleaning up the correct debris. We can leave that one because it is re-entering into the atmosphere. This one is our actual rocket, so we're going to rename this one. I'm just going to rename this Pathfinder 1. It really is a Pathfinder if it's going interplanetary, and then these two can just be destroyed. So technically we don't have a satellite in orbit around Kebin yet. We will have a satellite probably in orbit around the sun, but we'll keep an eye on that and see where it ends up. So anyway, let's leave the tracking station and let's start thinking about our next flight. So you can see now we have several missions available to us. We've got Enter into Space, which of course we are going to grab because even though we've already done that, we haven't officially done that according to these guys. We're also going to grab the Science from Space around Kebin. So we're going to ignore these for the time being and just focus on doing these two in our next flight. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up our Pathfinder 1 Sandstone rocket. And now, since Pathfinder 1 is in orbit, it's in space and it's not coming back, we don't need to do this one anymore. So I'm actually going to take this off and I'm going to replace it with the Pathfinder BCN balloon satellite. I'll tell you what, let's pop outside and have a look at the Research and Development building. And we actually do have 33 science available to us. So the first thing I'm going to do then is I think we will research the basic vehicles because that'll give us some extra science that we can do. Yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to research all three of these. And if we go into our KCT, we will be able to see that these are going to take about 4 or 5 days to research. It looks like they're all researching at the same rate as well, which is pretty good. Yeah, so what we'll do, we'll go back into the VAB and let's see if we can't do a bit more editing of our Sandstone rocket. Anyway, you know what, I don't think there's really anything else we need to do for this. What I'm going to do though is mark this down as Pathfinder 2, which it was actually the balloon rocket, wasn't it? So we'll go balloon. Now we do need to change a couple of numbers on here, so we'll set this to number 2 because this will be the second launch of this particular rocket, whereas this one is only the first launch of this particular satellite. So let's pop that on there. So there we go, we have our number 1 on this rocket, and now I'm also just going to reroute it to the satellite just because last time we launched it, it was routed to the actual guidance unit, so it made it a little bit more difficult in the long run. And now I am going to roll this out, but I'm going to roll this out to a different launch pad. Now you can change the launch pads in the VAB screen, but you can see it's bloody awkward to do sometimes. So what I normally like to do is just launch it onto the build list, and then if we go onto our build list we can actually select the launch site from here, and it's a much simpler way to do it. So I think what we shall do then is we will launch from, where shall we launch from? Let's do 39A for the hell of it, although 39A is a very big launch stand. But yeah, we'll leave it at that, and we will we'll warp until this is complete, and then we'll get into our next launch. So we are ready to roll out. However, I've just noticed we do have some world's first milestone because we have escaped the gravitational influence of Kebin and we've initiated the first flyby of the sun, and we've got quite a few funds for that. So let's have a look in the tracking station and see what the Pathfinder 1 is up to. So where are we? Oh, there it is. I'll tell you what, that is one hell of an orbit for such a small satellite. I'm quite impressed. That's going to be fun to keep track of in the long term. Anyways, can we do any science with this, I wonder? Yeah, it would appear we don't have any probe control, we don't have any electricity. So that is basically just a dead satellite now, and there is no recovering it. Maybe I'll do a mission to recover it at some point in the future. We'll have to see about that. But anyways, let's get this rolled out, and then let's see if we can't actually get into a proper orbit around Kebin and not just a mess. And we are ready to launch. So yeah, this launch stand is a little bit big for this rocket, but I don't think that really matters. We will go to our cameras. Let's have a look at this camera as we open the cover. I like this mod, it is a very cool mod. Anyway, now we are here ready for launch, so we will get ourselves set, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have liftoff. our roll program complete. Now let's start pitching as soon as we have finished rolling to the correct heading. Once again, I'm going to aim to try and basically point at the bottom of the prograde marker on the nav ball until we get to about 10,000 meters. Make sure that our maneuver mode is set in the bottom left so we can actually see what's going on without having to squint at the top of the screen. We're around about 45 degrees and we are just coming up on 10,000 meters. Like I say, I'm sure that I tried doing that in KSP2 and it just never worked. My rockets always flipped out. It might have just been the physics, because it was a rather broken game, was that, unfortunately. Even though it had so many good features and so much promise. Anyways, now I think we are getting through max Q now. We will throttle back up again until we get to about 70,000 kilometers apoapsis. Now I'm going to actually try turning off SAS and see if the gravity turn works. I thought we were going to flip out then. Now we are reaching 70 kilometers up, so I'm actually going to throttle right down this time. In fact, actually, I'm cutting the throttle because I want to get ourselves up a little bit higher before we start trying to circularize. But yeah, that is our launch sequence out of the way. Let's get ourselves down towards the horizon where we want to be. You know what? We do have enough time to go into the map screen and create a maneuver node, so let's do that. Anyway, I'm not going to bother trying to get it perfectly circular, so let's go back onto the flight screen. Let's get ourselves into position, and I might not even use all of the rockets on this, we'll see. Now, we might even be able to get into orbit with just the sandstone or the redstone rocket here. It's saying we've got enough delta V. But we have had an engine malfunction on the sandstone rocket, so we aren't actually fully in orbit yet. However, what we can do is we can decouple our main stage. Oh no, the RCS, we don't have forward control with our reaction control system, so it does look like we are going to have to use the throttle on the actual rocket. It's a shame that, because we were so close to getting into orbit. I'll tell you what I'll do actually. I'm going to point myself up towards radial out and then see if we can't use some reaction controls to get ourselves into orbit. And there we are. Oh, are we gonna stay? Are we gonna stay? Yes, yes. Oh, there we are. We are in orbit. You can see we are just over 70 kilometers. So the reaction control on this isn't brilliant, but that does mean that we are in orbit and we haven't even used any of the actual Sergeant rockets yet. They're not Sergeants either, they are Vicenzia rockets. I think they are actually Sergeants in real life, aren't they? But anyway, I think that's pretty much everything there is for this flight. We don't really need to do anything else. Like I say, we could always try and get our apoapsis up a little bit higher, just by basically spinning. Oh, we nearly had it then, actually. Oh no. I made a mistake. I did a bad. We've re-entered into the atmosphere and I've run out of RCS by the look of it. Yeah, I've run out of monopropellant, which is a shame, so we are going to need to use these rockets after all. Well, let's get ourselves spin stabilizing first and see how high the 11 cluster will get us. So, 3, 2, 1. That has brought us up into a 77 kilometer periapsis with a 7,000 kilometer apoapsis. So that's a rather high orbit, is that? So yeah, that's everything for that flight. We're not even going to be able to fire the next set of engines because we've run out of power and everything's done. Maybe I'll track it down one day and finish it off. But anyway, let's go back to the Space Center, or the tracking station in this case, and see what we are going to do next. Anyway, I think I'm going to call it for this video then. I hope you enjoyed it. In the next one, we're going to aim to build a more stable orbital launch system. We may also even get some Kerbals into space. And if you've made it this far, then I would first of all like to thank you for sticking it out. Secondly, that means you either are a big fan of Kerbal Space Program or you're already a fan of my channel. So, as a little treat, I've decided to include a little kind of cinematic video of all of the various rockets that I built in KSP2. So I hope you enjoy it. If you do and you have enjoyed this video, then please feel free to like and subscribe and maybe even leave a comment and let me know what you thought. Anyways, thanks for watching and hopefully I will see you in the next one.
Bogue,